In the movie, Marquis is flying to Kentucky with his family, but they meet an accident. He wakes up in a strange house and finds out that people around him practice black magic. Keep watching to know if Marquis can find his family and escape from that place. The movie begins with Marquis T. Woods, a wealthy lawyer, living in the city with his wife, Fiora, daughter Samsara, and son Tidon. Marquis is successful and well off. In the beginning, his wife gets stuck in a locked room, but Marquis opens the door using a pen refill, something he learned as a child. One day at the office, Marcus gets news that his father, who lived in Kentucky, has died. Marquis had run away from home as a child because his father was abusive. He tells his family about his past for the first time and says he doesn't want to attend the funeral. However, his wife insists, and he agrees to go with his family. The four of them fly to Kentucky in their private plane, with Marquis as the pilot since he knows how to fly. They have a modern plane that runs on diesel. Along the way, they stop at an empty diesel station to refuel. Inside the shop, Marquis notices a mojo bag and asks what it is. He remembers seeing it when he was a child, but doesn't know its purpose. The shop owner explains that the bag protects against those who want to control your body and advises them to take it if they're going over the mountain. Marquis dismisses this as superstition. A sheriff arrives to check his ID, and then they all continue their journey. As they fly over the mountain, the weather suddenly turns bad, with strong winds shaking the plane. The turbulence worsens, and they crash. In the next scene, Marquis wakes up in an old house, lying on a bed, and he is injured. He has a dream where his father is beating him. Then, an old woman named Eloise comes into the room. Panicked, Marcus asks her how he ended up there and where his family is. He tries to leave the house, but Eloise calls her husband Earl and their son Louis. Together, the three of them force Marquis back onto the bed. Earl tells Marquis that his plane crashed in their village and that he was the only person found inside the plane. Marquis gets even more anxious, insisting that he must find his family, but Eloise makes him unconscious with some powder. Eloise is actually a practitioner of hoodoo, and she creates a doll using Marquis' hair and some of his personal items. She casts spells on it and even puts some of his blood on the doll. When she's done, she explains that this doll represents him. In their village, they use traditional hoodoo magic for healing. She shows Marquis two kinds of potions, one green and one red. The green potion is for good, and the red one is for something bad. Eloise tells Marquis that she is an expert at what she does. She places the doll by the window and sprinkles white powder there. She explains that the powder will keep the devil from entering the room. This means there were risks linked to black magic that Eloise knew about. Marquis listens to her quietly, but he is sure something isn't right. Despite being injured, he tries to escape. He climbs out of the window and onto the roof in the middle of heavy rain. From the roof, he walks to another building where he finds many people from the village inside. Marquis watches through a hole above, seeing Eloise and Earl performing some magic tricks that leave him very surprised. Eloise talks about black magic and calls a mute girl over. She puts a live cat's tongue into the mouth of the doll she made. Suddenly, the girl starts speaking, and everyone around begins to cheer. Eloise does the same kind of black magic with a blind man. She places the cat's eyes into the doll and then transfers them into the blind man. Strangely, the man starts seeing. He looks towards Marquis and points, saying that he saw someone. Marquis becomes very frightened and quickly runs back to his room. When Eloise comes to check on him, he pretends to be acting normal. The next morning, Eloise gives him some food, which he enjoys. He pretends to still be hungry and asks her to bring more food. When she goes downstairs, Marquis cuts out the middle part of the bell in his room and keeps it with him. He does this so the bell won't ring when he sneaks out later. Eloise brings some bones to tell his fortune, and when she leaves the room again, Marquis looks closely at them. He realizes the bones are from a human hand, and he becomes horrified when he recognizes it as his son's hand, noticing the crooked finger. He vomits and starts crying. When Eloise returns, he pretends to stay calm. After eating, Marquis quietly unlocks the door and sneaks out. He easily opens the locks without a key, just like he did at the beginning of the movie. There was also a raven in the house that could talk, which shocked Marquis. He panicked and started running out of the village. After a while, he found his crashed plane with blood all over it. Marquis thought his family was dead, so he headed toward the forest to search for their bodies. But Eloise's son Louis caught him. The next morning, Marquis woke up back in Eloise's house on the same bed, with a long nail painfully stuck in his foot. He was alone in the house, as the whole family had gone somewhere. He pulled out the nail and quickly ran out. Outside, he saw 3 graves in front of the house. In grief, he started digging them up, but he didn't find his family's bodies. This gave him some relief. Marquise then went back into the house and discovered a hidden room. Inside, he realized it was Eloise's chanting room. There were many potions, dolls, and a book explaining that on the day of the blood moon, a person's soul could be transferred into another person, creating a model. He found a photo of Eloise, Earl, and the other villagers taken in 1860, meaning Eloise was over 180 years old. The villagers kidnapped people and stole their souls to extend their lives. Marquise also discovered many dead bodies in coffins, whose souls had been taken. This ritual could only be done on the night of the blood moon, which was going to happen the next day. This was what the shop owner had warned him about, but Marquise had ignored it. If he had taken the protective bag, he could have been saved. Eloise cast a spell on Marquis that would take effect on the blood moon. Marquis read the spell book and made a doll of Eloise, casting a spell on her. He then heard a phone ringing and followed the sound, finding Titan's phone. As he listened, Earl and Eloise came near the house. Earl noticed the door was open and said if Marquis had escaped again, they would cut his legs off. Scared, Marquis hurried back to his room and put the nail back in his leg. Eloise entered the room with Louis, who was carrying an axe, and checked Marquis' leg to see if the nail was still there. It was, so she sent Louis away. Marquis pretended that everything was fine in front of her. Later, he used the phone and made a call. The person who answered was the same police officer he had met at the diesel station, the one who had checked his ID. The officer told Marquis that his wife and daughter had been looking for him in Titan for 2 days. Marquis explained everything and begged the officer to come quickly. But when the officer heard about Titan's death, he became very upset. When the sheriff arrived, Eloise stormed into Marquis' room furious. She started torturing Marquis using the doll she had made of him, showing there was a real connection between the doll and Marquis. Eloise tied a rope around Marquis's doll and pulled out its tongue, causing Marquis to lose his ability to speak. She also tied his hands, making him helpless. Later, Marquis stood by the window trying to shout, but the police officer couldn't hear him. Even when the sheriff arrived, Marquis couldn't speak. After some time and great pain, Marquis picked up his doll, removed the rope, and managed to run out of the house again. While running, he came across the sheriff's car, quickly put the doll's tongue back in, and warned the sheriff to leave immediately. However, the sheriff was part of the villagers' plan, so he brought Marquis back to Eloise and Earl. That night was the blood moon, a lunar eclipse, and all the villagers gathered. Marquis' family was also there, unconscious under a spell. When Marquis saw his son, he noticed one of his hands was missing, realizing the bone Eloise gave him earlier was from his son. The villagers tried to put Marquis under anesthesia, but he had already cast a protective spell on himself in the chanting area, making him immune to the drug. Eloise attempted to cut out his heart with a knife, but Marquis quickly stood up and stopped her. He pulled the nail out of his leg and stabbed Earl in the heart, killing him. The villagers were terrified and fled. Marquis then broke the spell on his family using a special powder. A flashback showed that Marquis had secretly made dolls of everyone, including Louis, and placed them in water. When Louis tried to stop him, he drowned due to the doll's curse. Furious, Eloise attacked Marquis, claiming he couldn't harm her because she had hidden her own doll. But Marquis used a special powder to make her unconscious, and revealed he had made a special doll just for her. Marquis threw Eloise's doll in the air and smashed it with a hammer, causing Eloise to fall in pain. He then set the entire area on fire, using a white enchanted powder to block the exit. Eloise tried to escape but was unable to leave. Marquis had earlier found the villagers' dolls in the chanting room, and Eloise had promised them parts of his body. They usually used animal parts, but this time they wanted human parts. Marquis threatened to destroy all their dolls unless they let him and his family go, which would mean their deaths as well. Marquis then killed the sheriff and fled with his family in the police car. The final scene revealed that Eloise's doll still had some life left, as she had 2 dolls, one made by Marquis and one made by herself. Since her doll was still alive, it meant she was too. The movie ended on this note.